What is up, everybody? All right, I am super excited because, and I shaved because I'm so excited, I will be casting Duels of Runeterra again this weekend at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So this video will actually come out about an hour and a half prior to that. So if you want to check out the action, hit the link to my stream in the description below. But before that, we have a sick Fiora deck that I want to go over involving Unyielding Spirit and Fiora. Pretty nuts combo, not gonna lie. So, as always, my name is Justin, also known as Shit Just Works, and today we are going over yet another insane deck from the new set. Alright, and as always, we're going to start with going through the deck, followed by a couple of pretty cool games. Also, if you are new to the channel, do not forget to subscribe. We have been bringing out a ton of Legends of Runeterra content lately. Also, real quick, I want to mention our podcast. So myself and Roughhouse Plays, shout out to our podcast, link in the description below. We do it every single week, just talking about video games, not necessarily Legends of Runeterra, although I do tend to mention it quite a lot. But definitely check it out. It's a fun time. So, the Fiora deck. All right, as you can see here, we have not a lot of units. We got 3 champs, we got 12 units, and we have 28 spells. All right, and as we get into the deck here, real quick, I just want to go over what the win condition is, and that is quite obviously Fiora's alternate win condition of, if you don't know, killing 4 units in battle total, and then you win the game. So, how do we get that to happen? There's this neat new card that came out called Unyielding Spirit, and it's grant an ally for a burst spell, 8 cost. I can't take damage or die. Yeah, so that's a thing. Getting that on Fiora, as I'm sure you could guess, is pretty nifty. Now, getting this on turn 5 is even niftier. With spell mana, you can actually play this on turn 5 while having a Fiora on the board, maybe turn 3 or turn 4, as long as you remember to save and bank the spell mana. That's why it's always so important to keep spell mana, especially in a deck like this. That is actually, as of now, the only card in this deck, as I currently have structured it, that is from the new set. Beyond that, we're playing most of the usual Fiora stuff that you'd see being paired with Freljord. So obviously you want to try to frostbite the opponent to get some easy kills with Fiora. So we have 1 copy of Brittle Steel, mainly for those aggro decks, just in case we need to, in a pinch, frostbite something to save a little bit of health. We also have Flash Freeze as a 1 of, Harsh Winds as a 3 of, and that's probably the most important thing here. The reason why we go with 3 of that and not so much of the lesser expensive frostbite spells is because we're using our allies here, like Omen Hawk and Avarosian Sentry, to really, gum up the board and take some of that early aggression from the opponent. Avarosian Sentry also draws, which allows us to draw into Fiora a little bit faster. Speaking of draw, we got Entreat. I feel like nobody's played this card, but we're playing it as a 3 of. Entreat's pretty cool. Entreat and Fiora also allows us to play, as you can see, as you probably noticed, 0 copies of Repost. There is no Repost in here. I'm playing with that. I might put 1 back in. I'm not sure. But because we're playing the Entreat, you can pretty reliably get 2 Fiora, 1 on the field and 1 in the hand, giving you a Repost anyways. And you really are going to want to be protecting the very first Fiora you play, so there shouldn't really be a need to play the 2nd or 3rd Fiora in the first place. Beyond that, we have Standalone. Standalone buffs Fiora up. At least 1 standalone will usually mean she can kill just about anything and be able to win you the game. You do need to get at least 1 on her because there will be a point later on in the game where you will not be strong enough to kill other units at 3 attack. And then you have things like Judgment, which you're going to see in one of these games that just basically wins you the game with 1 card. She just kills the whole field and poof, you win. So, Catalyst of Aeons, I'm up in the air about with this deck as well. It seems good because a lot of times there's turns where you need the 8 mana for a Judgment and Unyielding Spirit, possibly on top of like a Freeze or a Purify or a single combat or something like that. So you really want to try to ramp up and get to that 10 mana as quickly as possible. Plus the heal alongside Kindly Tavern Keeper here also helps against aggressive decks like Burn and Aggro and even Bannerman sometimes. So without further ado, let's get into the gameplay. All right, so first up we have a new age aggro matchup, I guess you'd call it. I've played against a few of these decks. Swain, Gangplank seems to be a thing right now. I believe Mega Mogwai made this popular, releasing a video on it. And now I've seen it all over the place. So let's see how this deck does against an aggro deck like that. I did actually play against some other aggro decks as well, and it did win, so it seems to do decent. Again, with the first turn, you usually, you want to try to get a Fiora as quickly as possible with a standalone. That's usually the first goal. Beyond that, you need to be playing around protecting her, right? So I did decide to drop her on turn 3 here, but as you can see, critically, I had the 3 spell mana saved for a standalone. Now, obviously, I'm going to save the standalone. I'm going to wait till they play something to actually use it. He plays the Make It Rain. I'm not too worried about that. It doesn't kill the Fiora. So I'm still going to sit back, relax, and keep my standalone until he plays something to, possibly kill my Fiora. So then it looks like he played the Make It Rain just to get the Plunder effect off on this puppy, which it's actually a pretty good card. Not sure if you guys realize this, but the Plunder effect goes off every time you plunder. So when he keeps plundering, he gets that 2/2 effect off. So it's a decent deck, decent idea anyways to play around. I personally don't think it's the best deck right now. I think there's better aggro decks out there, like the Twisted Fate deck, link below in the description. Oh yeah. So now I'm starting to play a little bit more aggressively with the Fiora. I got the standalone. He's got no mana. So at this point, I'm like, all right, I'm going to get the free hit off on the Fiora to start pressuring him a little bit. And I can still bank 2 spell mana, so why the hell not? You can see the repost in my hand as well from drawing a second Fiora. And then I also have the retreat. The entreat, not the retreat. So I have access to another repost if I need it. I'm able to take the attack here because, honestly, it seems pretty safe. I have the single combat. I have the repost. I have the frostbite if I need it. Obviously, don't want to play the frostbite in a situation like this. I do opt for the repost. Now, he plays a Make It Rain. So this is kind of tricky here. I do want to try to save the Fiora, obviously. I do have the Entreat as a backup Fiora if I really do need it. I play the single combat to actually get the barrier to save the 2 damage on the enemy follower there so that I do end up saving the Fiora. Unfortunately, I forget how this goes. I think the Fiora actually sticks. So at the end of the day, that ended up being a good play. Now, there's a good shot that my opponent probably has something to kill the Fiora again this turn at the 2 health. But again, I do have the Radiant Strike in hand to also save her if he plays something that does 2 damage. He doesn't have it. He just has more burn. He has the Tavern Keeper. Not really sure why he's playing the Tavern Keeper, not going to lie. I don't know if that was in Mogwai's version of the deck. Whatever. So we block here, which you'd normally do in this situation anyways, get the good trade. Now, at this point, we have the Unyielding Spirit, and we're going into a turn where we can play it. So we're feeling pretty damn good about winning this game, and that's usually the turning point, right? Once you can get Unyielding Spirit off on a Fiora, you're golden. Now, what I'm doing here is, again, I'm trying to bait out something else from my opponent before I actually play the Unyielding Spirit, right? So using the 1 mana card to try to bait something out is huge here. Now, I'm not going to lie. I was not expecting an Unyielding Spirit from my opponent. There goes that. I guess that's the benefit of Plunder for you. You can actually take your opponent's key cards. So I actually have 1 less Unyielding benefit Unyielding Spirit in my deck because of it. But it turns out to not matter. I will say, if my opponent played this a little bit better, I feel like he might have had a chance to win, because the issue is if they get an Unyielding Spirit from a Plunder, now my Fiora, they can just infinitely block my Fiora if they just keep that unit on the field. Now they're kind of locked in only having 1 unit on the field, which means I could, potentially play some Tavern Keepers and some other, Avarosian Sentries and stuff just to push through damage, every single turn bit by bit. So it'd be a really weird thing to play around, but I feel like that's probably what he should have done. Instead, he attacked with the Gangplank, which to me doesn't make sense because I can just block and kill it. Doesn't take any damage. And I got to assume my opponent knew that was going to happen, right? He just blocked with his unit, so I'm not really sure why he did that there. But I do decide to go in for this 2/2, once again, kill it. He plays the plunder. Doesn't matter. I think I actually end up killing this unit here. There's not much you can do. And again, like once you get that Unyielding Spirit off, you're golden. It's a pretty easy victory in the bank at that point. So now there is another way to win as we get into here into the second game, and that's Judgment. You can potentially win without an Unyielding Spirit with a Judgment and have that go. I don't know. It's just it's very hard to actually get that off and have the Fiora live, but it does happen. So as you can see with the mulligan, we actually decided to keep the Unyielding Spirit and the Catalyst of Aeon. So you're probably thinking that's a pretty interesting choice. Personally, I think getting Unyielding Spirit early is very important. Obviously, just as important as a Fiora. If you can get a Fiora and an Unyielding Spirit firsthand, I think your win rate with this deck goes up astronomically, right? Now, the Catalyst of Aeons allows me to get to that win condition that much faster. Now, I will say this game was very close when everything's said and done. This is basically your typical Bannerman deck. I can't imagine what they're splashing with the Shadow Owls. I don't know if it's that rally chick. I'm not sure. Forget her name right now, but I don't know. It ended up being pretty close because I did have so many big costing spells in my hand. And you'll see here in a second the way that basically you have to play. You still have to play to save your Fiora, right? And you know that the Bannerman deck is really only going to have combat tricks. So out of battle, the Fiora is pretty safe. I think I luck out here, and they're not playing any repost, or they at least don't have it in their hand for my Fiora to live. Oh, no, they had a single combat. Okay, so this single combat is definitely a pain in my ass. My Fiora ends up dying. I do play the Radiant Strike to be able to, just basically trade a little bit better on the board. The biggest thing with Bannerman, right? So against aggro, this deck doesn't really mind aggro too much because it's a lot of smaller units that the Fiora will most likely be able to kill. Against Bannerman, it's equally as aggressive and maybe even more tempo-oriented than aggro would be. And the units can, for the most part, kill the Fiora. They're all stronger than the Fiora, like this Garen that he just played, like that Badger Bear that I just ended up killing with the Radiant Strike. So it's definitely difficult. Bannerman's probably one of the harder matchups for this deck. Drawing this Entreat here is incredible. The Entreat is literally what allows me to win this game. Because if you look at this board state, you're like, wow, I'm screwed, right? I'm going to end up taking a lot of damage here. I got nothing really that I can do with my hand. Unyielding Spirit on anything on the board doesn't make sense. I do decide to play the Harsh Winds here so that I'm taking less damage. When you get to this point in the game, you need to survive as long as possible to still potentially get the Fiora off. And what I'm thinking now is, all right, I got a Judgment in my hand. I got an Unyielding Spirit. I have an Entreat. I literally need to be able to survive long enough to play all of those cards. Because Bannerman's only win condition at this point is to attack with everything and do, a ton of damage, right? And if he's not attacking with everything, then the Fiora can at least block one thing. I take less damage, etc., etc. Now, the single combat basically seals the deal as far as me being able to get enough kills of Fiora. So I'm not worried about the Fiora win condition at this point. What I'm worried about and why you can see I'm kind of iffy about playing this is if my opponent has a single combat. If he has a single combat here and my Fiora dies, it's game. I lose. Fortunately, he does not have a single combat. And I basically thought to myself, okay, my probability of winning if I don't play this Fiora is super low because I need to use the mana while I have it. I have 2 8-cost spells in my hand. I can't not play the 3-spell Fiora right now and then still not be able to play another 8-cost spell with her next turn. And obviously I do have the Judgment. Now the standalone, wow. you want to talk about a hell of a draw. That won me the game, right? So this standalone field clears for me. I can stand alone and then Judgment in the same turn now that I have enough mana. So at the end of the day, keeping the Catalyst of Aeons, you could argue, was good. I did end up having enough mana to play a lot of these large costing spells that otherwise probably would not have ever come out of my hand at this point. I did also opt to keep one of the large costing spells. You could argue that. I don't know. Again, we don't know if it's the right decision or not. But this Judgment, the second this comes down, my opponent probably feels super bad. He does, so it's interesting what he does here to keep 2 of the units alive. I was thinking to myself too, and this is why I was thinking about what to block. If he has a repost and I don't play Judgment here, then I lose. Because right now he does not. He has 19 damage on board. So if he plays a repost, I lose. Now, I actually should have waited for him to play the repost before I play the Judgment, because I'd still be able to do something. But I will say that this is just such a crazy interaction. He does get 2 of it. He's literally so close to winning because of both reposts, being able to barrier the Garen and the Zithria. But I get 3 kills. I actually don't end up winning with Fiora. I think he ends up surrendering here. But obviously he knows. I have the single combat in my hand too. He doesn't know that, but he knows that I'm going to end up winning after I challenge these units. So you can clearly see how crazy Judgment or Unyielding Spirit can both be. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Honestly, this deck is super fun. I'm not going to lie. You literally just are the whole game waiting to get one big ass Fiora on the board. And it's funny because there's only really 4 cards right now that can affect this Fiora. You have Will of Ionia, can put it back in your hand. You have Dragon's Rage, can put it back into your hand, right? I think it's if you don't kill it, it gets recalled. You have that Obliterate Sea Monster thing, but that is really hard to get off. And then you have that Anchor card that I also forget the name of from Nautilus that will shuffle it back into your deck. So that's really the only 4 things. Will of Ionia is obviously a really good card that a lot of people have played. Not sure if that's going to be a hard counter to this or if this deck actually sees a lot of good play in this next meta. So we'll see at the tournament this weekend. So again, check out the link below to my stream if you guys are interested in catching all the casting action for the tournament. As always, everybody stay healthy, stay positive. I hope shit just works for you, and peace out.